called the winds in the area squirrely and unpredictable, and when combined with the heat, a recipe for disaster.
That a fire vortex, also called a fire tornado, started swirling over the Deer Creek fire in Utah.
There is a sound that survivors describe before a wildfire overtakes a neighborhood. Not the roar of flames, not the crack of timber, it is the wind. A low, pressurized moan that builds until it becomes something inhuman, until it sounds less like weather and more like a decision.
Multiple wildfires raging out of control tonight, fueled by hurricane-force winds. The fire in the Pacific Palisades, now the most destructive in the city's history.
The power has been cut off, but the night is still bright on the drought-stricken, tinder-dry hills around Los Angeles. The people have gone. Mandatory evacuation.
It's like Armageddon. When you can see the flames coming up over the houses and you're just getting out of the driveway and the smoke and the ash is so thick, I'm surprised all of us got out of there without burning up ourselves.
Los Angeles had heard that sound before, but not like this. Never like this. The city of Los Angeles is not naive about fire. Californians live with it the way coastal communities live with floods, as a seasonal reality, a managed risk, a thing that happens at the edges. The Santa Ana winds roll in every year like clockwork. Brush burns, hillsides char. Firefighters contain it. Life moves on.
We want to make sure that everyone gets out of harm's way, and that has been our top priority. So far, we have been successful in that. Then we can begin taking care of property and houses.
That is the contract Angelenos believed they had signed. This time, the contract was broken. On January 7th, a wind event of historic proportions descended on Southern California, not a typical Santa Ana. Meteorologists would later describe it using a word that almost never appears in official reports: catastrophic.
Matt, it's what's shocking to me and what is really painful to see and hear is the incredulity and surprise of these people, the firefighters and the survivors alike. And they describe something as if it was the first time it happened. And it's true, it's the first time it happened to them. But the same thing happened to thousands of people in Valparaiso, Chile this spring. It happened to thousands of people in Lahaina, Hawaii, a couple of years ago, in Paradise, California, just up the highway from Los Angeles. It happened in Fort McMurray, Alberta, in the subarctic of Canada in 2016. And damage as bad as this, fires moving as quickly as this.
Gusts exceeding 100 miles per hour tore through mountain passes. Power lines snapped like thread, and dry brush that hadn't seen meaningful rain in months became something close to gasoline waiting for a spark. It didn't have to wait long. Within hours, two separate fires ignited simultaneously on opposite ends of the city. The Palisades fire erupted in the coastal hills above Pacific Palisades, one of the most affluent communities in the country. At the same moment, the Eaton fire exploded near Altadena, a historic neighborhood east of Pasadena, home to a tight-knit community that had built its identity over generations. Two fires, two communities, one city holding its breath. What made these fires different wasn't just their size, it was their speed. The Palisades fire doubled in acreage within its first 6 hours. The Eaton fire moved so fast that evacuation orders outpaced the ability to deliver them. People received alerts while flames were already visible from their driveways. Here is what most people never understood about that night. The fire wasn't the primary weapon, the wind was. The fire was simply what the wind carried, and the wind had no intention of stopping.
Over 1,000 buildings destroyed in this small coastal community alone.
Much of this street's already been destroyed by the fire, or is being destroyed right now. But what's happening here is that the fire crews are trying to protect an undamaged building next door. It's quite arbitrary. Some houses are untouched. across the other side of the street here, this house has already gone. The house next door, untouched. And they may do the same to try and save that property. But it's far and few the number of properties and houses where they've got the resources and the people to do that.
Firefighters arrived to a scene that violated every assumption their training was built on. Hydrants ran dry, aerial tankers were grounded. The tools that had always worked simply didn't. The city wasn't fighting a wildfire anymore. It was fighting something that had rewritten the rules entirely. While meteorologists tracked wind vectors on satellite maps, real people were making impossible decisions in real time. In Pacific Palisades, a retired school teacher grabbed her dog, her documents, and nothing else, and drove through a tunnel of orange sky with fire on both sides of the road. She made it out. Her house of 34 years did not. In Altadena, a man named Marcus stayed behind to help his elderly neighbor evacuate. By the time they got to the car, the street behind them was already gone. They drove forward because backward no longer existed. These were not edge cases. These were Tuesday night in Los Angeles. The scale of what followed was staggering. The Palisades fire alone would burn more than 23,000 acres, making it the most destructive wildfire in Los Angeles history. The Eaton fire consumed over 14,000 acres in just days. Together, they displaced more than 150,000 residents. They destroyed over 12,000 structures. They took lives that belonged to neighborhoods, to families, to decades of ordinary, irreplaceable history. But the number that haunted investigators the most wasn't the acreage, it was the hydrants. When firefighters connected their hoses and turned the valves, water pressure dropped to almost nothing. In some areas, nothing at all. A city of 4 million people and the infrastructure built to protect it failed at the single most critical moment. Fire crews stood at burning homes with empty lines, watching structures collapse in real time. An official investigation would later reveal that water storage tanks serving the hills had not been adequately refilled before the wind event. A decision or a failure that turned manageable into catastrophic.
The president's energy and climate change policies are pretty well fixed, and he campaigned on being very pro-drilling, very pro-fossil fuels, very ESG. I don't think this environmental catastrophe, any more than the hurricanes that we experience and things like that, even if the frequency of these events we can acknowledge it's happening more frequently, I think the political views on it are fixed.
The fire did not spare based on zip code, on wealth, or on preparation. It moved through celebrity mansions and working-class bungalows with the same indifference. That was perhaps the detail that shook the city most deeply.
0% containment. We have over 879 firefighting personnel assigned.
Not that the fire was powerful, but that it was equal. Los Angeles has burned before. It will burn again. But what happened in those hills, across those two simultaneous fires, in those hours when the wind refused to rest, that was not a warning. Scientists studying fire behavior in an era of accelerating climate patterns are now using a new term for events like this. They are calling them the new normal. And the city is only beginning to understand what that means.